It is good to have you with us today. Britain's so-called ping-demic, in which over 500,000 people got text messages telling them to self-isolate as they've been in contact with somebody with COVID, has now hit the Prime Minister, Boris Johnson, and his Chancellor. That's after the Health Minister tested positive for the virus. Downing Street initially tried to bypass the rules by taking part in a pilot daily testing programme, sparking both outrage and a rather hasty U-turn.
What happens when the rules apply to the Prime Minister? He tries to wriggle out of them and pretend he's on some pilot scheme that exempts him. I'm afraid that, yet again, we see it's one rule for them and another for everybody else.
One rule for them, with another made up because pilot scheme won't go down well. Fallout will be bigger than Barnard Castle eye test.
That pilot scheme in full.
Dear NHS Track and Tracy, Boris and Rishi have a special pass and do not have to isolate. Yours sincerely, Boris and Rishi's moms.
It took less than 3 hours for the about turn to be announced, and it came amid mounting controversy about Monday's lifting of almost all COVID restrictions in England. Dubbed Freedom Day, it's being hailed and decried in equal measure. Well, let's learn a little bit more about this here on RT International. We're now joined by Bharat Pankania, a senior clinical lecturer at the University of Exeter's Medical School, joining us here on RT International. A very good evening to you, sir, from Moscow. Thank you for joining us. Your stance on this Freedom Day, is it a good idea or not? Because some people are saying the decision was based in either science or in politics. What's your position?
I think very much so that the decision was made in politics, without a doubt in my mind. There are a lot of signals telling us that we have a problem here. So on the one hand, we've got a rising number of cases. On the other hand, we have removed all restrictions, and also, unfortunately, at the same time, we have removed all mandatory infection control measures. I will give it to Prime Minister Johnson that about 52% of the UK population has been immunized, and that will stand us in a good stead. But to remove all those restrictions and infection control and a rising tide of cases and leave it to voluntary control is a little bit risky.
Mr. Pankania, some experts argue that while positive tests are up, infections are down. Does that make sense to you?
Yes, what they're trying to say is when you test positive, you're a case. But those cases are not translating into larger hospital admissions and more serious hospital admissions. And that is a testament to the vaccines doing their job in protecting the people.
What about the issue of I guess, lockdown and even vaccine fatigue, for example? I had a UK guest on recently who said the essential fears of the virus have worn off and that many people in the UK have virtually returned to pre-virus behaviours. Does that sound accurate to you?
Many people have, and I hope that most people will not, because the virus is still there. We're getting variants. And with Africa and Asia and South America very, very poorly immunized, we could get another variant, which could be, I hope not, but which could be more severe disease causing and more transmissible, etc. I just hope it doesn't happen, but we've got to keep our guard up.
Well, you talk about keeping your guard up, and you mentioned it. It's almost every few weeks we have a brand new variant, and it's not surprising that some people, or maybe even populaces, are getting a little bit tired of all of it. What are your thoughts on COVID passports, and will they become mandatory, do you think?
Unfortunately, by drip, drip, drip process, it looks like it's going that way, although I personally disagree with it, because I would like a vast swathe of the population to be immunized. Therefore, I don't have to ask, are you or are you not immunized? And I would like the world to be immunized. And therefore, I don't have to worry about, are the Africans, are the Asians, are the South Americans immunized? And when we do that, the case numbers will be suppressed and we will return back to normal very quickly. But at this rate, we're not anywhere near normal because we're not immunizing fast enough.
You had mentioned that the UK is measuring a 52% vaccinated rate across the entire population. You mentioned the idea of a herd immunity. Is 52% enough? And can life slowly but surely return to normal then in that case?
Not by a large margin, it is not enough. And the reasons are 52% is protective, but to get the advantage of herd immunity, you would need about 75% fully immunized. Unfortunately, with a Delta variant, which is more infectious, you now have to up it to 80%, 85% before you can get what you would call that comfort zone of herd immunity. Unfortunately, with SARS-CoV-2 vaccines, they're not as good as, say, the vaccines for measles, because we don't produce sterile immunity. In other words, you can be immunized, but you can still get mild to moderate infection. And then we've got variants coming up. Therefore, the traditional concept of herd immunity as applies to infections like measles, etc., is very hard to also apply to SARS-CoV-2 infections.
Mr. Pankania, I wanted to ask you at the beginning of our conversation, I'd mentioned, do you think that Freedom Day is a good idea or not, and how much of it is based in politics? And you said that you believe that the idea was entirely based in politics. Do you think people in the UK still trust Boris Johnson?
I think they had a signal yesterday when Prime Minister Johnson was trying to fool the public by saying, I'm going to take part in a pilot scheme. And then they issued a notice from 10 Downing Street that this is what Prime Minister Johnson and the Chancellor of the Exchequer are going to do. And then 3 hours later, they did a reversal. And all these little failures are all indicative of, we find it hard to believe you, trust you, and have faith in you.
Bharat Pankania, Senior Clinical Lecturer at the University of Exeter's Medical School. Thank you very much for joining us. We appreciate your opinion.
Thank you.